One game, 2 hours. Hook me. Genshin Impact. Welcome to another installment of What the Hell Am I Doing With My Life? And this time we're taking a look at Genshin Impact, which is of course the new, game by MiHoYo, which are probably most well known for their mobile giant Honkai Impact. And I didn't further specify the genre because, what was I expecting when I got into this game? I was expecting a run-of-the-mill anime-style MMORPG. And what I got was kind of that, but also not really. You see, Genshin Impact shares a lot of similarities with your standard MMO. You have your server select screen when you fire it up. In-game you will have a ton of event and daily login pages. You have your item shop. And it even had all the same recording problems other MMOs did, which is also why I failed to record the first 30 minutes. Terribly sorry about that. The only thing it really lacks is, other players. There's nobody else in this world besides NPCs. And that might lead you to believe, okay, so it's an instance-based MMO. But as far as I can tell, there is no hub area to meet other players. There is no dungeon or group finder. The only way to interact with other players, as far as I'm aware, is to invite them into your world, which will allow you to play co-op. So not quite what I was expecting, but that's the point of this series, to go in as blindly as possible. And truth be told, I love it, because that means the entire game can be played solo from start to finish. And yet, there are a few more differences that I failed to notice until much later on. But let's start at the beginning. So right after an exciting and well-done cutscene, I got to pick my character. And that's when I should have noticed that something was awry. Because there was no character customization to speak of. Weird, I thought. Because most free-to-play games that sell cosmetic items for premium currency have at least a small amount of free customization options. Oh well, assuming that would be unlocked later, I went on my merry way. And the first 30 or so minutes were actually incredibly intriguing. You get to kill some enemies right off the bat, and it's filled to the brim with honestly pretty engaging cutscenes. Not to mention that the world itself is just beautiful. You can hear the wind breeze across the fields, dynamic cloud shadows moving alongside you. There's a ton of wildlife, squirrels and storks going about their day. The atmosphere is just soothing. It's a beautiful world. And after getting to know the initial game mechanics, I acquired my first party member. You see, Genshin Impact features a single active unit party system that lets you switch on the fly. So while there is only ever one character actively fighting, you can switch between them at any given time. This of course allows for some cool combos and shenanigans during combat. Speaking of which, let's talk about the combat for a minute, shall we? In the first 2 hours of play, the combat remains very basic. You have a standard attack and 2 skills, one of which can usually be charged. Additionally, you have the option to dash out of an incoming attack. While that sounds pretty bare bones, I will say that later on you unlock a lot more skills and talents, though I haven't had the chance to test them out yet. I'm sure they'll make fights a lot more interesting. But that isn't to say that the combat early on is bad. Far from it, it actually has quite a few things going for it. For one, you can of course always switch to another character and combo abilities that way, but more importantly, there are also elements. Enemies can be frozen, shocked, set on fire, flung through the air, all of that good stuff. And these elements are of course not just tied to abilities, but also often linked to the environment. So there are, for example, puddles of water or explosive barrels that you can make full use of. Or you could have your mage make all your enemies wet and then switch to your fighter and freeze them. The possibilities are there. And while an enemy itself may not be vulnerable to an element, his equipment might just be. So for example, if an enemy has a wooden shield, you can set it on fire and render it useless. So the combat isn't actually that cut and dry.
Think you can get away?
But back to the general overview, because after I finished the first party quest, the game gave me what is called a glider. And you can probably guess what this does. Exactly, it allows you to fly through the air, which makes traversing the world a whole lot more fun. And then I unlocked the wish feature. What is the wish feature? Well, see, it's that tiny thing that I was completely oblivious to. The game has gacha. Of course it does. How did I not realize this sooner? Just because it's not a mobile game doesn't mean it wouldn't have gacha, right? You can roll for heroes, you can roll for weapons, you can roll for more heroes, and you can roll for more weapons. And I know it probably sounds like I'm condemning this, but I'm just trying to convey my bewilderment, because I never even entertained the thought, which was obviously very silly. I don't want to go into too much detail, as it is a very expansive topic and it would require a separate video. I might cover it in a future dumpster fire if there's a demand for it, but bottom line, I don't actually mind. Unless a free-to-play game is huge, it has a hard time surviving on just cosmetic items. And I think it's a problem that really solves itself. Because if the pay-to-win factor in a free-to-play game is too high, the player base will die out, and so will the game. If the game is heavily pay-to-win and yet it still survives, it's really the consumer's fault for going along with it. And if the remaining player base is just a bunch of whales shoving their e-peens into each other's face, then what the hell do I care? Of course, it's not quite so simple. There are exceptions, especially if pay-to-win elements get shoved in at a later stage of the game's life cycle, but in this case I don't mind it, especially since you're not actively competing with other players here. And after that initial shock, it was pretty much standard procedure. Go out into the world, complete quests and dungeons to increase your adventurer rank, so that you can do harder quests and dungeons to increase it even further. There's probably a fair amount of grinding to be done, but there are also a lot of side activities to break the monotony. You know, gathering materials and herbs, looking for hidden items, glider races, stuff like that. And so, did Genshin Impact get me hooked? I was gonna say no, because these days I simply don't have the time for an MMO. But since it can apparently be beaten solo, yeah, I'm gonna put at least a few more hours into it. Genshin Impact, ladies and gentlemen, available for free. And unless you have a gambling problem, I would recommend to check it out. It's actually pretty decent. And with that, this episode comes to a close. As always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to leave a like or dislike using the buttons below. Subscribe for more. And this is Evolutionz signing out. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.
It's a reward for helping me clear out that Hilichurl camp. Hey! Why doesn't Paimon get a reward? Because this reward is useless to you, Paimon. But I'll treat you to a traditional Mondstadt delicacy. Sticky honey roast. Sticky honey